Oh dear God, it's a Space Invaders machine, an actual Space Invaders machine. I think I feel a video coming on. I'm here at the Centre for Computing History in Cambridge to take a look at the incredible wealth of machines, games and assorted retro paraphernalia on display. We're going to take a look at all this stuff, plus an in-depth interview with the museum's director right now. Hello there, you gorgeous antelope, and welcome to another edition of Jason Arnold's terrifying house of obsession, broadcast to you, this time from the Cambridge Centre of Computing History. If you're new to this channel, then why not hit subscribe so you don't miss any future nonsense just like this. This museum had me at the shop in the entrance hall. Take a look at this. You can actually buy ZX Spectrum games on tape. Yes, that's actual cassettes and stuff. Wow. And speaking of cassette tapes, let's have a look at one of my favourite things in the whole museum. Ta-da! There are quite a few arcade machines in this place, not just Space Invaders. Look at this whole row of them, including Alien Syndrome, complete with lovely Alien on top. There's also just about every home computer under the sun. You really don't know which one to sit down in front of and play first. There are even those handheld arcade machines that were really popular in the 80s for about 5 minutes. Inevitably, Space Invaders really grabs my attention, even though I discover exactly how hard it is to play it with one hand. Frankly, it's no easier to film yourself for YouTube while playing Centipede either, because it involves a trackball and a fire button, but it's really good fun trying. Turns out the only arcade machine here, which makes it really easy to film yourself for YouTube, is Pac-Man. This museum has so many cool themed rooms, such as this 70s room. There's even video player. Be still my beating heart. You go inside the 80s classroom and you suddenly find yourself confronted by a load of BBC micros and such. Oh, this will take a few of you back. I don't think we actually had BBC micros in my school. But having had a quick look around the place, let's start firing some questions at the museum's director, Jason Fitzpatrick, and I'll throw in some more footage from the museum while we chat.
The museum's been in existence for about 11 odd years. I might be wrong here, somebody will correct me, but we moved here about 6 years ago. The history so far, so this was it was a private collection. It was a private collection that was growing rapidly. A lot of money was being spent on it when it shouldn't have been, really. You know, everybody will recognise, any collector will recognise, you know, you start collecting those machines you used to have, then you collected the ones you couldn't afford, then you start to collect ones that weren't available in this country, and you find reasons to collect wider and wider spheres of things. So it was getting like that, and the trouble is that collection wasn't being seen by anyone. So it's, you know, you buy something on eBay probably, you open it up and go, oh, I've always wanted one of these, and then you shut the box up and put it in the loft. What's the point, you know? So I felt guilty at the time about spending so much money on things that I then left languishing in the loft.
Yes.
So it was a case of thinking, well, okay, you either do something with this, you make it available to other people to see, or you get rid of it all again. I've always been somebody that likes to put on a display. Yeah. So, you know, my company was involved in that kind of thing. My company designed websites, and it was out there advertising itself, and somebody new would come in and we would sit down to talk about business. But actually what I've done is I had a BBC Micro up on a shelf and a Spectrum over here and an Atari 2600 over there, just as bits of art more than anything. And it didn't matter who came to visit, they all had something to say. Oh, my dad had one of them, or I remember that, or whatever. And they either loved it or they hated it, but they had something to say. And that made me think, well, actually, maybe it's not as geeky as I thought. Maybe actually everybody has a relationship with computers and therefore games consoles and things like that, regardless of whether they're actually into it or not. So that shaped how the museum is. So all this stuff is here, and it can be as geeky as you want it to be, but equally it's as interesting to everybody else because it talks about how these things, what else was going on in the world. So the information we have against here, the year they come out, it says other things that were going on in popular culture, and it just takes people back to that time, allows them to think, oh, well, actually that was then, was it? Right, I thought it was before that or whatever. When we first got this place, we really probably, I think it's fair to say, we couldn't afford it. We kind of stretched the truth a little bit on whether we could afford the rent, and but we took on the rent and we said, right, this is what we're going to do, and we opened it on day one, give or take. So it was a bare warehouse. We put up tables, cheap old tables. Some stuff was on the floor, some stuff was still in boxes, and we said, pay us a couple of quid, £4 I think the entry was at the time, and just come and have a look. And every single entry went back into designing panels, getting them done and all that kind of stuff, and it's just been the same ever since. Yeah, there's been a lot of thought gone into how it's been created, or how it's going to be created, as I suppose. At the end of the day, these things are the vehicle to tell the story. There is some stuff to say about the ColecoVision or the Intellivision there, or the Atari, but actually what did those machines do? How did they change our lives? For me, with the Atari 2600, waking up early on a Sunday morning and be able to plug it into the telly before the rest of the family are up and play video games like I was at the arcade. It was amazing. It really was amazing. And kids don't get that feel anymore. It's not like that. So for me, these things are telling the story about who we are and how we've changed. But also the things that these they allowed us to do. So looking at how gameplay back then was fairly isolating. It was 1 or 2 players, but you had to be in the same room. And then gaming got that tag that actually it's a very isolating thing, and it's not good. But gaming now is actually very social. With everything online, kids might not necessarily be talking to each other in the same room, but they're talking to each other and a lot more people. So I think my son probably has more friends, however you want to define that word, than I did, because he's talking to these people across networks. So there's a lot of very, very big positives to gaming for lots of people, and we want to just try and get that across. At the end of the day, the games industry is worth more than our film industry and other industries added together. You've got to get another generation involved in this, and that's what we're about. We're, telling the story about where it's come from, looking about where it's going, and trying to get another generation involved in developing games in some way, shape or form. Back in the day, your Atari 2600 was trying to be the arcade. There were arcade machines out there, and if you wanted to go and play video games, then you would go to the coast probably and go and visit the arcades and have a go. Beyond that, there's no access to them. So things like the 2600 and the other consoles we have here, we're trying to bring the arcade into the home. But obviously, it was worth spending a lot of money on the hardware in an arcade machine because people would be putting money into it and it would make money. In the home, it was a bit of a different matter. They needed to be relatively cheap. Therefore, the games and classic, Atari 2600, for example, Space Invaders and Pac-Man don't bear a great deal of resemblance to the originals, and people sit there and they slate them for that. They were terrible things. No, they weren't, and it didn't matter that they were nothing really like it. To me, as a 7-year-old, 8-year-old, whatever, playing Pac-Man on the 2600 or Space, it was just as good as any arcade. It's all I had, and the feeling and everything was just the same. People need to get over that sort of comparison with what was going on in the arcades. So, for a lot of this stuff, it was trying to create the arcade in your home. So we have the arcade machines here to show you, what it was before these.
And of course, they're really popular.
And people love them anyway. I mean, there's nothing quite like standing in front of an arcade machine with the joystick. It's even better when you don't have to put money in. So, they're all set to free play, and you can come and have a go on these things. And it's, again, just standing in front of an arcade machine takes you back.
I've got so much more to ask Jason about, but first, let's take a Space Invaders break just to appreciate the majesty of this machine. Just for a minute, soundtracked by Baby Chaos. Oh yeah, that's better. Back to Jason.
We try and do everything here as original as we can. You can't always do it, and the sad bit is at some point the silicon will die in all of this lot, and we'll be finding other ways to do it. But at the minute they're good, so we let people use them. Yeah. And the other thing that's worth noting, I suppose, is that these are all duplicates of the ones in the collection. So for a lot of people that visit a museum, they think they're looking at your collection.
Yes.
And of course it is part of the collection, but these aren't the ones that sit in the archive. Yes. Being preserved. Wow. So if something happens to these, it's not the end of the world. Wow. In fact, the Intellivision has in fact died. So we will have to either repair that or replace it or something. Yeah, but these things happen, and we can get others. We have spares anyway. But at some point in the future, maybe it'll be that we have modern electronics in these that do the job. But not until we have to. You know, we can still keep these things going. We've got a lot of great volunteers that keep the place running. We're an accredited museum, there's other museums around that do this kind of thing, but we are accredited. So that means that we adhere to the same sort of standards for curation and for preservation that the big museums adhere to. So that's really important to say. We're also a charity, so that means when you spend money with us, like you have been coming in, we can get another 25% of that from the government on top, which helps us a lot. And we really rely on the general public. So it's hard to get this kind of stuff sponsored by people. If people want to give money to charity, they want to give money to kids' charities and cancer charities, and rightly so. So we kind of take a little bit of a back on that one. But with the number of people that visit and the way that we do things, it's all been built by the volunteers. So, you know, we don't go and spend money frivolously on getting design companies in and big expensive ways of doing it. We do it all ourselves, and we keep it, you know, as cheap as we can, but equally as good as we can. And people that visit keep this place going. So it's really important that you've come here today and taken a look. Even more important that you're doing this video. So thank you.
Astonishingly, even though what you can see in this particular clip is only one part of the entire museum, Jason Fitzpatrick's ambitions for the place have only just begun.
The ambitions remain as they were on day one. So this isn't it. This is kind of a beta test. When we were first sort of talking about this idea and putting it out there and talking to other museums, it didn't make any sense to them. You know, why would you have a museum that concentrates on the last 40 years? You know, that's not a museum. And we were trying to get across the fact that things have changed a lot in the last 40 years. We have changed a lot. Probably 50 years now, I should say, really. Now things are different. Now people get it. At the time, we wanted to have kind of a statement building in Cambridge that Cambridge can be proud of and say, actually, quite a lot of this tech comes from Cambridge. Classics like the Acorn BBC microcomputer was developed in Cambridge. Sinclair Computers was in Cambridge. EDSAC was developed at Cambridge University. The Leo computer, which is the world's first business computer, was based on EDSAC. So it has a tie back to Cambridge University. So, you know, there's a lot to shout about. People come in here, they enjoy it. We are vaguely self-sufficient. You know, we don't need too much support in terms of sponsorship just to keep the doors open. We need sponsorship to do the things we want to do. Preservation work, education is a big part of what we do. So we do need support, don't want to say we don't, but to keep the doors open, we're self-sufficient. But we haven't got that big, shiny statement building that Cambridge, or in fact the UK, you know, this needs to be, in my mind, a national, international museum. The collection's vast. So we were talking earlier that we have probably 160, 180 machines on display, roughly, I don't know. But there's well over 1,100 in the collection. And you can only see a tiny bit of it through where we are at the minute. It's all available online, so that's the good thing. That's what's making it a truly sort of international thing. The idea is that this is fantastic. What we have here we're very proud of, but we still want to take it to that next level and create something you know, truly sort of, well, international. It seems impossible. Right. But then I thought this was impossible. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, yeah, being completely honest, no, it does seem impossible. It will take many, many millions of pounds. Oh, right. However, we're I can't remember, we're 6 years roughly here now. This building, if we wanted to buy it, would be 1.5 million pounds. But we just bought it. Ah. So that I thought was impossible. but we had an amazing donation from one of our trustees, linked with ARM, and he has said, well, I want to make sure this thing exists for, you know, forever. So we have bought this building, so we now own our own little piece of Cambridge. It means that this is not going anywhere. So we don't have to pay the rent anymore. And it seems now we have a nice grounding to then go to the next impossible step. So all the steps along the way have seemed impossible when you're edging towards them. And it does amaze me that the support we get is incredible, absolutely incredible. The volunteers put hours and hours and hours into this. They get nothing back for it apart from the sense that they're playing a part in it all. It's like the museum, you know, we've got all the people on the roof and information about who these people are and what they've done for computing and therefore what they've done for society. But the people involved in the museum are just as important. You know, the people that have helped us get this to where it is, they're just amazing people. So yeah, it does, I admit, you know, the next level seems fairly unobtainium, but we've been there before and we've done it. But you know, somewhere like this, nice big glass building, go around with a nice cafe with loads more computers, that'd be pretty cool, wouldn't it? You never know, maybe somebody's watching this that has a few £1 million spare.
So if you're out there and you're rich, then give Jason Fitzpatrick a bell. Also, you might want to subscribe to my Patreon, because by God, the camera work in this video has been undesirable, and you might want to chip in to help me buy a gimbal. In a moment, I'm going to show you some other videos you might enjoy on this channel, but just for a moment, let me thank my patrons at Patreon who support this channel with a monthly pledge and help it improve and grow. Thanks also to you for watching. Until the next video, don't forget to embrace your obsession.